Welcome to a new update. We are going to talk about altcoins, and altcoins have been consolidating, some have been correcting, some have been looking absolutely great, and some have been looking absolutely like shit. So, we're going to talk about the altcoins today. As I said yesterday, it's going to be a shorter update as I'm into a business trip right now, which has been taking a little bit more of my time. Next week, and before I continue, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also check me out on other social media platforms like Twitter or Instagram, where we post content as well. What I would like to say is that next week on, I'm going to make a video, which might even be as long as an hour, I guess, on how you should be building a portfolio if you have $1,000 portfolio. Or I think in general you would say looking at a small altcoin portfolio or a small portfolio, and how can you leverage or maximize that, and what's the theory behind it. Today we're going to talk about the price action on altcoins, which means that if the altcoins are going to run, it's going to be great. But at this point, you can see that there is some correction taking place across the board. And we're going to look at the overall market cap. We're going to look at some BTC pairs. And we're going to look at a few altcoins that have been making some momentum at this point, to make sure that we are looking at a theory of buying the dip still. So we want to find arguments of that. Yesterday I've been talking about Bitcoin in itself, and Bitcoin is currently looking at a case of consolidating, which means that if Bitcoin is bottoming out, and I think it's close, that can be the kickstart of altcoins to start firing up. So I'll be looking at that. First, total market cap, currently looking at a consolidative period, right? We are anticipating the blocks, which means that at this point in time, what you want to see is that somewhere at the bottom in this range, you want to find a support for the altcoins, which means, or for the total market cap, which means in this ballpark. Then through the next run, what you want to achieve is that Bitcoin is already here, right? The total market cap isn't there yet, which means that this gap needs to be created through the strength of altcoins. So in the upcoming period, Bitcoin will be going sideways, and that period altcoins will start to move up. And if we are around this area, we start to have a correction, and from there Bitcoin starts to shoot again. Okay, so what we're looking at right now is the rotation game from Bitcoin towards the altcoins, and that rotation game should be looking like a case where Bitcoin is going to stay, go sideways probably. We are finding support in this region, and then the total market cap does this. So our theory is that we suspect that altcoins are going to do really well, or at least altcoins are outperforming Bitcoin. So we need to find some more arguments if we follow that theory, because we base it from the fact that if Bitcoin doesn't break highs or doesn't become volatile at all, it means that you clearly are looking for a case of the markets to shift momentum towards the altcoins, right? So, okay, this is one. The total 2 market cap is the second argument. So, again, if we're looking at Bitcoin, we can see that we are at those highs, right? We are at the levels of March 2022. But once we want to look at a case of the altcoins, we need to look at total 2 as well. And the total 2 has just barely been breaking above a consolidative period of 550 days. It broke out. It's showing some resistance becoming support. There's a flip taking place. So this entire block, we are basically leaving it, which means that in terms of price action, there's a gap between these two levels. And these two levels are the levels that you should be watching. Why? Well, price tends to move into a range, and then once it breaks the range, it starts to become very volatile, or at least the trend has started. And in this case, we're looking for a trend into this range. So Bitcoin has already entered this, and Bitcoin is currently going to be in a period of consolidation between the two. Ether is lagging behind. The total market cap is lagging behind, which means that the total market cap lagging says that we are looking at a case of other cryptocurrencies to start trending outside of Bitcoin. And in this case, the total 2 is giving us that argument because this is a market cap excluding Bitcoin, which means that it's even further behind and that it can still generate a lot of momentum. Because if we're looking at the total market cap, what do we need to achieve to actually get there? It's correct, 580 billion. If we're looking at the total 2 market cap that wants to exceed towards that level, here we go, 480 billion. So we need less. And also Bitcoin is at the bottom of the range. So if Bitcoin jumps up by 15%, you are quite sure that we get into the ballpark of the 580 billion. So that's how you get there. Total 3, basically the same view. So I'm not using this too often, but it's excluding Bitcoin and ETH. And what we can see is that also the range that we have been acting in is technically the area where you want to find yourself into support, which is this green zone. Technically you want to see this hold as a very important level of support, as we have been seeing resistances flip. That's great. So preferably you want to see it above here, and if we do, we've got this gap that we're going to close and we are going to get towards this region. So now we can also estimate a potential rally that's going to take place on the rest of the market. So if we assume that Bitcoin runs first, then Ether, then the altcoins, that at some point in time the altcoins need to get here as well, which means that there is still some upside of around 350 billion to be happening, which means that for Ether against Bitcoin, or Ether in itself, there's probably going to be a run of approximately 150 billion to be gained, which means if we add 150 billion, and I came to this conclusion with the following guideline: total market cap, approximately 580 billion to gain. Bitcoin probably going to gain around 15% towards the range high, which is around 100 billion, which means that you get to the number of 480 billion. That is for everything excluding Bitcoin. So 100 billion needs to be captured through Bitcoin, which is from 42 to 48. Now, if we use the total 2, which is this one, we say 480 billion. If we exclude ETH, we can say that to get to that level of 75% strength, we need 355 billion, which is 130 billion goes towards ETH, which means that ETH goes to 430 billion, which is close to 3.5k. That has to be going towards a price of Ether, which is at the same level in March 2022 as that we can see here. So that is all from a technical point of view. Then there's also the argument that we're looking at a case of Ether always bottoming out pre-Bitcoin halving to generate more momentum, so that Ether is always going to pick up in a pace that is due to a period of consolidation of Bitcoin. We are again there, and we find external arguments, which is that we find arguments of the spot Ether ETF to be approved. We saw a delay this week. It's not surprising. The actual date that we need to focus on is May, which probably is going to lead into such a momentum towards these highs or towards the Fibonacci levels, which, as a matter of fact, is also the resistance zone that we see here. So we're going to move in this block. And actually, because of this retest that we have been doing at this level, we have entered it. So we are actually in the path where Bitcoin was during October of 2023. We are in the structure where altcoins are already pacing up and Ether is doing the exact same, but it still provides harsh corrections because altcoins are very corrective at this point. So I think that at this point Ether is still going to continue running towards the area of 3.8k, and we're going to find ourselves into a top at that specific level. Now, when we're looking at ETH against Bitcoin, I think ultimately the scenario remains the same. Bullish divergence on a weekly time frame showing that we are reversing here. First time ever we are seeing one. Crucial level that we need to break through is 0.06. If we do, I think the range high is going to be the target. As a matter of fact, you can actually say if 130 billion needs to be added towards Ethereum, it's a rally of approximately 43%. So in that case, if we say 43%, it is again nice. There we go. We need to become at the resistance zone here and then probably have a path that we have been seeing like this, where we just rally towards the high, consolidate, and then we continue to move. All right, thumbs up, great. Now, what we're looking at as well, and I want to discuss 3 altcoins, and I spend around 2 minutes per altcoin. First, Chainlink. Chainlink is due to a momentum. It's pretty much consolidative with the pattern that we see of ETH. So Ethereum needs to move, Ethereum ecosystem is going to move, DeFi starts to move, Chainlink starts to move. So these two are technically what we're looking at. In this case, Chainlink started to correct quite heavily based on the fact that we had a first run, also due to a big event taking place, hit resistance, which we see at 4,500 here, drops back down towards a heavy time frame or high time frames, resistance becoming support, bounces there, and now it's consolidating. What is the technical aspect here is that we are making higher lows, higher highs, and I think that in the coming period, if ETH starts to show more strength, Chainlink is going to rally towards the resistance and starts breaking out of this level towards the highs here at 9,000 to 10,000. I think in terms of BTC value, it's very relevant to expect that it's going to do a 2x. In terms of USDT value, you can basically say, okay, well, I mean, if we're looking at ranges and levels of importance, then I think we're going to see altcoins coming back into this range, which means that if we bounce back into it, and if I need to do this, we technically have been retesting these lows here. We have not been retesting the $8 level, but that's because the markets are so super positive that at this period you probably are not going to see that at all. But you could suspect that if you think Bitcoin is going to do a plus 15%, Chainlink goes to 17 to 18. But if you think that with the breakout of that 4,500 level, Chainlink is going to move to the upside to 9,000 to 10,000. From 17 to 18, you need to do 2x, which is this range high here, which is this level, which we can expect Chainlink to go to before we have a pretty substantial correction in the entire market. Now, another one is Arbitron, which I've been referring to quite some time, which is the fact that we have been seeing some pretty beautiful retests. Here we see a retest, here we see a retest, another retest, and now we technically are having a breakout and a failure, which means that we define ourselves into a range, right? So we're finding a level of area where I think we could be getting into a position. We've got a longer correction taking place. So what are we looking at in terms of entry points? Well, best entry would be 122, but also the other entries are found around this level, and the second one is here. So you can start scaling into this after it has been seeing this entire run, a correction of approximately, 30% is taking place, 30 to 40%. So anywhere in this ballpark is where you want to get yourself into an entry point, because this is the first real impulse move. If this is going to happen again, if there's going to be another impulse taking place, it is going to be to 350 or $5. And the thing is that you don't really have any price action at all to actually look forward to. It is just continuing an uptrend. So even in the Bitcoin pair, and you understand that if Ethereum does well, Arbitron will do well as well. All right. So Arbitron is going to follow suit. So at that point, if Ethereum is going to consolidate and Arbitrum has the unlock in March, I know it has the unlock in March, but if this is going to last and we're going to buy the dip, this is where you want to get yourself into an entry point. And the same goes for OP. So what should you be doing when you're looking at the markets at this point? If Bitcoin is finding itself into a bottom and maybe we go down a little bit more, from that point on, altcoins are going to outperform Bitcoin. From that point on, the return is going to be made by being into altcoins. And next week, we're going to discuss the altcoin portfolio. Have a good day. I'll be seeing you again on Saturday. Ciao.